Hey everyone, this is just Kyle here at the very beginning mentioning that this is a special episode of Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. As you can see by the title, this is a special conversation that I got to have with Anthony de Mare, and I think it turned out really, really well. And this is in celebration of what would have been Stephen Sondheim's 95th birthday. So hopefully people can enjoy this small bit of a birthday present this year. All right, enjoy the episode. Anthony de Mare, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
So you are here to discuss this newest album that's come out, Liaisons II, All Things Bright and Beautiful. But if I can just take a moment here to call out the original album, Liaisons. I was turned on to that album a few years ago, by a friend of mine. And I mean, it's kind of the same idea. You've gone through a bunch of different arrangers and reinterpreting Sondheim's work from the piano. I have to tell you that I'm not even joking. When I've probably listened to it dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times, the Joanna in Space by Duncan Sheik off of that album, I seem to go back to that one over and over and over again.
Yeah, a lot of people, that I get that comment about that piece a lot. It has always been a huge audience pleaser in concert.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed on Spotify it's one of the pieces that gets the most hearings or the most hits. I remember when Duncan, he was very enthusiastic about being part of the project at the time. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he says, one of the criteria in the project was one composers who actually played the piano, so they would write something. Yeah. Duncan said, I don't really play the piano, I'm a guitarist, but I would like to do I really would like to do this. And I was glad he chose Joanna because no one at that point had chosen the song. And I really wanted it chosen because they were all given free rein. There was a wish list, but I told them they didn't to that. In any case, he came up with what was a very skeletal piano part. And he said, let's work together to sort of embellish this. And I took it and embellished it more. And because he told me what the audio track would be, he said, he had recorded some licks on the guitar, and then he, of course, manipulated them electronically. So from that point, it sort of went forward, and the piece then came together. It's not one of the more technically demanding for the piano, but that doesn't matter because I think the transparency of the piano part is a wonderful complement to the electronics that he created for it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the cool thing about both of these projects is how I think maybe when people hear like these are just piano arrangements, you kind of get an idea in your head about what that means. But I really do think people have like really taken that and ran with it to be like, we can like bend this or like reinterpret this, or yes, there's piano at the base here, but we can still do some different things. Not to disparage piano players, but I mean like there is more to it than that.
When we had given these kind of parameters to each composer for them to roughly follow, which was because Steve really wanted the melodic material to be retained as well as most of the harmonies, and most of them did that. Mm-hmm. But of course, we chose the word reimagining from the start as part of the title of the project because we wanted them to have the freedom to create pieces that were in keeping with their own style as well. Now, obviously, nearly all these pieces are going from brilliant vocal songs to instrumental works. And Sondheim was very aware of this. He knew that for the composers retaining the melodies and harmonies, he knew that the structure or form of the song would change because of the lyrics not being present. Many of the composers, I think, successfully and earnestly set out to really capture the essence of the character who is singing it, as well as the lyrics in the instrumental writing. So some of the pieces, of course, they take the word reimagining to a larger extent. Others were more direct in terms of arrangements or different direct versions of the pieces. Some of them, you can tell right away. Others, it takes a while before the melodies evolve in the piece. And some of them were also trying to tap into the spirit of each of the songs and how that was going to direct them.
I think that's what I love about listening to these is that it really does take you on a journey, because you're right. Some of them are very quickly like, oh, I know what the melody is. I know what this song is. And some are so pulled apart a little bit, and like playing around with some of that. There's like, oh, okay, I finally figured out what this is that it's kind of reimagining.
A few of them chose to, a term we use in compositional terms, a few of them chose to deconstruct the song.
Right.
And we asked them not to do that, but some of them felt they wanted to go that route. So, we sort of let them. Most everyone stuck to his desire to retain the basic information from the song and the basic musical content from the song as well.
Yeah, I think what it proves to me, this is like a well-loved, I don't know, topic that I've returned to on this show over and over again, which is, even though I also focus a lot on Sondheim's lyrics and his like poetic language that he likes to use and his internal rhymes and all that kind of stuff, I think oftentimes people just focus on that or only focus on that without really digging into the fact that there were some really great like compositions that he made musically. And I think that this project really allows for that, which is like, if we remove the lyrics entirely, we're left with just the composition, and what can we do with just that composition, which is lovely to kind of delve into.
I've always felt one of the goals or missions of this project was to show Sondheim as one of the great American composers musically. And of course, the lyrics are equally as brilliant and really enhance and bring those songs to life, obviously. But I think in talking with all of the composers, in discussions with them along the way over the years, they all said they were either secretly inspired by his work, or they've always admired it, so they embraced this project with open arms. Some of them said it was challenging, because what you hear from many people is that the songs are already so perfect. What can I do with this? Others felt like it was a walk in the park. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. But each song, both in the original collection as well as in the new collection, really ends up being, as I've always said, a perfect marriage between the original material, Sondheim's original material, and the composer's voice. And it really melds together quite beautifully. And he was very proud of that. He was very honored by that. He said he was always humbled that so many of these composers who he considered to be so brilliant, he said he was just completely humbled by the fact that they wanted to set his melodies and harmonies and really do something with it. So he was intrigued by the whole idea. I mean, this kind of thing of transcription in piano versions of music from the theater as well as other sources goes back a long time. It's just nothing that really, people have tackled Rodgers and Hammerstein, they tackled Bernstein, Gershwin, of course. There's even virtuosic versions of Gershwin songs for solo piano. But no one had done this with Sondheim, and I've loved him since I was a kid. I mean, I know all the shows, and I wanted to. This was something I wanted to. I've always wanted to do, and I was just delighted how it gradually just kept coming to life and kept growing from that point.
Well, before we jump into some of the individual songs here, there's people who have listened to this show will know that there's these two questions I like to ask of every new guest. The first one is just very generally, what made you be drawn to musical theater just as an art form? Was there a moment, or was there a kind of a gradual obsession?
It goes back to childhood. I mean, since I believe the second grade, I was 7, I was involved in children's theater. I've been studying the piano since that age, and I also studied dance for about 8 years. And they all continued for an 8-year period. And I've always loved the theater. So, I mean, I used to run to the store years ago, and like I would just look for new musicals. I've never heard of, but I thought, oh, this is a brand new musical. It's a recording. I'm going to take it home and listen to it. And I would just buy it and eat it up, especially with the Sondheim musicals.
Right.
I think then over the years, the theater always stayed with me. I was involved in a lot of regional theater as well early in my career, while I was studying piano, while I was at the conservatory, and in my graduate degree as well. But there was always in the back of my mind a way of how can I involve theater into the work at the piano. And one of the other areas I'm sort of been known for, pioneered, is this idea of works written for speaking, singing pianist, where composers will take either established texts or original texts in collaboration with a writer and create a piece whereby the pianist recites or sometimes sings. And that has created its own genre now. Composers really embraced that for everyone. So I think it was just, the theater has been part of my life since I was a kid. Films, theater. I was one of those kids young people that just embraced all kinds of music. We had all kinds of music at home. And so I just loved it.
And then my second question is always like, when was the first time you were aware of Stephen Sondheim? So of those albums you were grabbing as a kid, like, do you remember what your first one was?
Yeah, it was Company, but I had heard previously, no, I should say it was A Little Night Music and then Company. No, it was Company, then A Little Night Music, because Company was first. And then it was a year or two later, I heard Judy, of course, everybody said this, I heard Judy Collins' version of Send in the Clown.
Right.
And it just blew me away. And I completely then investigated Little Night Music and realized how different it was, how much more classical it was from Company. I mean, that's one of Steve's geniuses. The genius of his work is that he was able to embrace so many different styles and use them in so many ways to express the human condition in each one of his shows. He always knew just what to choose perfectly at that moment. And so Company was the first. Little Night Music. I remember Pacific Overtures. That's the one I went to the store, didn't know anything about, saw it, and brought it home and thought, I have to listen to this. And I had to wait years in order to see a production of it. But
I was gonna say, I think for a lot of people, they pick up Pacific Overtures and are like, "What is this?" But it's also one of the scores for me that I've grown to deeply, deeply love. Like, I think sometimes it's hard to get into that one at first.
I just remember being so intrigued by it. I loved the orchestration of it.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what also drew me to that, because it was so different from the two previous shows that I had sort of explored. This was a completely new thing. And then a friend of mine said it, he was going to New York to see it. And I was, so envious at the time because I really had wanted to see it.
As I mentioned there before, of course, I've listened to the first collection. And I noticed something here, though. The first album has 37 tracks on it. I could be making this up, but I'm assuming you maybe thought this was like a one-time opportunity, so you were trying to grab as much inspiration as you could, or am I completely wrong on that for the first album?
What do you mean for the 37th track?
The 37 tracks, yeah.
The 37th track is my piece. And the reason I did this sort of melange, if you will, of excerpts from Sunday in the Park with George as a piano piece is because when the project began, we needed to put something up on the website because the composers had not yet written their pieces. So I set out to do this version, which I kept revising. And I never included it in the collection. I only used it sometimes as an encore in the concerts. But then people told me how much they really liked it. So I programmed it a little more. And then ECM definitely said they wanted it on the album. So it became the 36 plus 1 is what I used to say. Yeah. Because now I say the project is 50 works, but it's actually 50 works plus 1.
So for this one, for the sequel, I guess we'll call it, how did you go about grabbing the different arrangers for this one?
It was a combination of many things. After the first collection, a lot of composers kept coming to me saying, oh, gee, I'd love to be part of this. Are you going to extend it? And we didn't know at the time. We were involved at the time of, once I got all the pieces, it was the fundraising for the commissions, getting them performed, and then that recording happened over 4 years because it was 3 discs of works. And we said, well, if we decide to do it, to extend it, a lot of composers had come to me. Some who couldn't do it the first time, but were really interested. They couldn't do it because of conflicts. In one case, it was Kevin Putz. He was originally asked, and he couldn't do it. He had won the Pulitzer right when I asked him, and he was just so inundated with commissions that he said he wouldn't be able to do it. So he was always on my mind for if we were to extend it. At around 2017 or 18, my manager at the time had said, "Have you thought? Sondheim's 90th is coming up in 2020. Have you thought about what you might want to do?" And in talking to the producer, Rachel Colbert, who's been with the project since its inception, we sat down and discussed how about an extension as a birthday gift for him, which was a way of having more composers in. And I thought I always wanted to bring the collection up to 50. It was sort of a goal. Steve thought it was ambitious, but he said, by all means, go for it. if you want. And so there were some of the newer, younger composers that were really emerging on the scene I wanted to tap into because I was really intrigued by their work, like Timo Andres, Christopher Cerrone, Paolo Prestini. One of my favorites from his TV scores and film scores was Jeff Beal. So I contacted him right away because he was one of my first choices. And of course, Kevin Putz said he was definitely on board the second time. He definitely wanted to do it. And the weird thing is he chose a song that was already chosen. I mean, composers were given that option. Usually if a composer knew that someone else chose a song, they would choose something else because obviously there's a wealth of riches there. But he chose Being Alive. And in the previous collection, Gabriel Kahane had chosen Being Alive. But they're so very different from one another.
Right.
And that's what I love about it. They're so completely different in their conception. And that was exciting. So there were other composers like Meredith Monk I had wanted, and the first time around she couldn't do it, and she was curious to be part of it. And several of also Steve had recommended this wonderful German theater composer, Mark Schubring, they had been friends for, I guess, several years by that point. And Steve wrote to me and said, this composer is extremely talented. I really like his work. He also plays the piano. I think he would write a beautiful piece. And so we contacted him, and he was so enthusiastic about it. In fact, on the disc that you were just sent, in the back is a kind of a quasi George Seurat illustration of Sondheim. That was
right,
Mark, because Mark is also a visual artist as well.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and he led in.
What I love about his inclusion, this is true for some of the other people, but I'm always interested on which songs they pick, because of all songs, he picks the theme from Reds, which I think is another one of those songs which most people just never engage with, but it's like, it is a great little piece of music to kind of reinterpret.
Yeah, and Mark said it was the only piece he wanted to do. He loved it was one of the songs he was completely in love with. And so he definitely wanted to do that, and no one else had chosen it. The other composer was Mark Bennett, who had won the drama desk for The Coast of Utopia. I mean, Mark is a sound designer as well as a composer, and Steve has admired him for years. Now, Mark was a close personal friend of like 30 years. And I was going to approach Mark, but I wasn't sure he'd be able to do it because he was so busy with scoring a lot of plays at the time. But when Sondheim mentioned him, and I thought, this is the perfect opportunity, and Mark jumped on the idea.
To jump into some of these individual songs here then, well, let's start with this one, because the other kind of, I guess, bigger name that's associated with this is Jon Batiste, who he ran Album of the Year at the Grammys here a couple of years ago, was the band leader for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert for many years. But he does the gun song / Ballad of Booth. And again, going back to this idea of reinterpreting what like a piano arrangement can be, he uses actual recordings of different famous figures throughout history in his composition as well. So how did you approach him? And then let's talk about the work.
It was a connection through my co-producer, Rachel Colbert. She had known him, and she had worked with him. And we thought, he would be a great choice. She approached him, and he said he was definitely interested. I was a little surprised by the songs he chose. I didn't expect him to go to Assassins.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is cool, because we only had a couple of pieces from Assassins in the original collection. He, and along with Ted Hearn, who's another one of the newer composers, both chose from Assassins. But John, and I remember having a phone conversation with John about the piece, because I wasn't sure if he wrote music down. I said, John, I really don't want lead sheets. I said, can you write the piece out? He said, definitely. Don't worry about that. And he did. He wrote this beautiful piano version, melding the two songs together. And then he had said, he had written back and said he wanted to include these audio tracks. He hadn't chosen them yet, but he wanted some spoken text over it, having to do with some of the political issues surrounding it. And he was really, if you look at his program note about the piece, he said, he basically says it examines the psyches and perspectives of some of the most infamous assassins of our time. And in his arrangement, he quoted, of course, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, John F. Kennedy, and a very disturbing one by Donald Trump.
I just think it's such a great amalgamation, because especially if you're familiar with that show, like always kind of remains relevant, kind of unfortunately, but a bold way to include like new political figures, contemporary political figures inside of the song.
Right. He had marked in the score, when he sent the score, he marked where the audio tracks would go, but he was still kind of vague on exactly where they would be most effective. I sort of suggested different points where I thought they could go. It felt, I mean, there was, once you get into the piece, the piano writing is so beautiful that I just thought I want a certain section of it to just be the piano. And that's why the JFK quote comes at the very end to close it out. And he liked that idea, because the JFK one was the hardest one, or was the one where we just didn't know quite where it would be placed. And it seemed at the end it was perfect, whereas the others come right at, in the first sort of third or half of the piece.
This is kind of maybe a dumb question, but something I just thought of. Obviously, this is pressed into an actual like CD that people can purchase as well. So are you ever concerned with like how long certain arrangements go for? Like, do you give them parameters, or is like, we'll figure it out at the end if we have to cut things?
Yeah, no, I was going to mention this when I told you we gave the parameters that Steve's request was to retain the melodic and harmonic. Even though he said he knew the form and structure would probably be played with because it was going to be an instrumental piece. We had told everybody between 3 and 10 minutes. Most of them came in between 3 and 8.5 minutes. William Bolcom's is 1.5 minutes because he completely misinterpreted the assignment, because he was one of the first asked, and he's an old friend of Sondheim's. He thought this was, at that time when we started the project, Sondheim was turning 80. And Bill Bolcom thought that this was going to be a small birthday gift for his 80th birthday. So he wrote that short little, what he called a little night fuguetta, where he combines a snippet of Anyone Can Whistle with Send in the Clowns, counter subject. But most of them came in, we said, most of them came in between 3 and 8.5 minutes. The majority are anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes. Even in the new collection, those same parameters were given, because we knew, like for the concerts, I mean, there's this wealth of riches for, I could pick and choose from concerts. There's so much to choose from to make a concert. So I just wanted to make sure there was always a balance. I mean, there were certain instances, like when I went to Australia, they wanted the entire collection over 3 concerts.
Oh, wow.
We did it over 3 concerts there.
I was going to wait until the end to ask this, but just because you brought up like the concert aspect of it, is that a goal, or are you seeing that just happen naturally of like orchestras from around the world asking to program these, or is it something that you tour around with yourself to kind of help perform?
Since they're solo works, I was mostly doing them solo. A couple of them are for 2 pianos. The Steve Reich version of Finishing the Hat, which is one of the most popular, I actually made, and that's in the original collection, I actually recorded the piano 2 part, which is the Steve Reich part, basically. And piano 1 is the melody. I recorded piano 2 and accompanied myself, but several times I have performed it with a second pianist, which is fun to do. And Jason Robert Brown originally took Greenfinch and Linnet Bird from Sweeney Todd, and he made it for basically the piano 1 is the big part. The other, there were 3 other piano parts that we pre-recorded. When it came to the publishing of the scores, I just told him, I said, I don't think anyone is going to play this if they have to go into a studio and record these little snippets of other tracks. So he made it into a 2-piano version, which is, he just condensed it all into a 2-piano version. And then in the new collection, the amazing pianist Conrad Tao, who is also a wonderful composer, made a 2-piano version of Move On. And he was generous enough to also make a solo version of it for me when I was alone. But most of the time, the concerts were solo concerts, and we embellished them with, because we spent many years interviewing all the composers, asking them basically the same questions, and we would use excerpts of those interviews. Like before I played the piece here, I'd say, here, listen to what this composer has said about working on this piece. And some of them were entertaining, some of them were very deeply felt, some were very insightful and intuitive. So that became another element of the concerts. And then we excerpted from the premiere. We interviewed Sondheim on stage, and there's a 4-minute excerpt of that interview, which I was often using right after intermission. It would introduce the second half of the show, and then I'd come on and continue with the pieces. Presenters always left the choices up to me, although many of them, after hearing the recording, would say, can you program this, this, and this? They knew their audience.
Mm-hmm. And Sondheim obviously was alive when the first album came out, and he had involvement with this one. Was he able to hear any of these compositions before he passed away for the second album?
Second album, I sent him the scores. The premiere, he was going to come to the premiere was going to be here in New York at the end of March in 2020. Of course, the week before the lockdown prevented.
Mm-hmm.
And so it all got postponed a year and a half, which is after he, well, I shouldn't say this. It got postponed to the 21-22 season in New York, as well as in the Los Angeles premiere was in 22, and Chicago was at the Ravinia Festival was actually rescheduled as well. During the lockdown period, I recorded several of them at home just because I wanted his opinion and his feedback, but he did get the scores. He was delighted by what he was hearing. He had every intention of coming to the premiere of the first there were two concerts for the new collection, and the first concert was November of 21. It was the week before he passed away, and that very week, that Sunday night, I believe he had gone to a preview of that production of Assassins that had been mounted off Broadway.
Yeah.
The next night, he went to the opening of the new version of Company that came from London. He was supposed to come to my concert on that Thursday, but because he had this accident with his foot, his doctor told him he should stay home for the rest of the week. So he was really sad that he couldn't be there. And then a week later, of course, before I could send him the recording of the whole concert, that first concert, he had passed away. The next concert happened in the spring of 22 then. I should say this, we always deferred to him. We would always keep him updated on the progress of the project, what was going on, and he couldn't have been more supportive. Sometimes he had suggestions. We honored all of his suggestions when he would make them. But again, like I said originally, he was just so delighted that this huge conglomerate of composers across all these vast genres were so interested in his music.
I have to admit, obviously, like I never met the man myself, but that is the recurring thing I always hear about either reinterpretations of his work or like concerts of his stuff where like, obviously, yes, he would have feedback or anything, but he was always just so eager for people just to do the work and try something different and new because he understood the value of collaboration and yeah, like pushing it forward rather than just keeping it the same for decades. So yeah, it's always nice to hear that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think each of these pieces does that. You know, the composers were sensitive to the fact that they were very aware that they were holding something very valuable in their hands. They were going to have to work with it in a way that was respectful and sort of really bring it to life in a different way.
Now, you already mentioned Mark Bennett. This was one of the arrangers who was suggested by Sondheim himself. He does Everybody Says Don't,
right,
which a song from Anyone Can Whistle, which one of those shows that I think people have picked out the music to save, not so much the rest of the show, but the music is so good that it's nice to hear it again in different forms. What do you want to say about Mark Bennett?
I was wondering what the question was.
I know, there was no question. That's why I had to...
No, Mark thought long and hard about which song he wanted to do. He was looking at a few of them, but he ultimately settled on Everybody Says Don't because, as he says in his notes, I think he said it's a driving song about making a difference and overcoming the roadblocks that naysayers put in your way. And he thought it would be fun to springboard off this with Steve's that repeated 16th note based idea, and he sort of created this kind of virtuosic, relentless piece that is actually quite a direct version of the original song. But Mark also plays the piano quite well, so he really, it tackled my own chops, my own chops. We brought the tempo down. He had marked it really fast. We brought it down a little because it went by so fast that you missed some of the
you don't want to get your fingers blistered or anything like that. You want to slow it down.
he was so supportive, and we, since he's a close friend, I invited him several times to come over and listen to it. I said, I want, give me as much feedback as possible. And from that point, it just always went forward. And it's a very gratifying piece to play. And again, audiences love it because it has that vibrant spirit and energy of the original song, and that drive. And he uses the entire keyboard in a way that's quite innovative at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like the best example I can think of off the top of my head is like Flight of the Bumblebee or something like that, where it's just like it's very frenetic the entire way through.
Yeah, like with him and a few of the other composers, I had to suggest taking notes out because some of them went by so fast. I said, you don't miss them, you don't need them, and the listener will be fine without them. This also happened with composer Kenji Bunch when he did the Ballad of Sweeney Todd, because he plays the piano, but he's primarily a violist. And we took out a lot of notes, and it still works as this virtuosic tour de force, the way he constructed it.
Well, the last song I just wanted to touch on here is one that's credited to you. And this is going to become another one of my obsessions because I love songs that are cut from musicals that then go on to have a life of their own. And specifically, this one is All Things Bright and Beautiful. This is a cut song from Follies. So what made you settle on this one specifically?
Well, like I said, in the first collection, I did that excerpts from Sunday in the Park with George and pieced them together as a piano piece. And then I was asked, Rachel Colbert, my co-producer, had suggested, you should do another one because the first one was so successful. And some of my composer friends, as well as other pianist friends, said, gee, I didn't know you made these arrangements. And I said, well, I don't normally. I said, but it was actually fun to do. And so Rachel suggested that I should probably do another one. Now, how it started is it was the original collection was premiered at Symphony Space here in New York over 3 concerts. The first 2 were a year apart. In the second concert, Steve had come to that concert as well, and he was interviewed again on stage. Well, in the green room, my husband Tom was talking to him, and Tom just happened to say to him, one of the songs of yours I've always loved was All Things Bright and Beautiful from Follies. And Sondheim looked at him and says, I've always really liked that song myself. I was really sorry we had to take it out. And Tom said, yeah, it's a really special song. And so because it was Tom who brought that up, and I thought, I really liked the song myself, I thought, oh, this is the perfect choice to do it because of their conversation. So in setting out to do it, I loved the orchestration of that opening prologue to Follies. Mm-hmm. And so because he said he didn't want to totally abandon that song, he used obviously excerpts of it in the orchestration of the prologue for Follies. I decided to set some of the prologue and then get into the song. Now the song is kind of repetitious because it relies on the lyrics, the different verses sung by the 2 characters. So I set out to write, and the piece sort of wrote itself. But along the way, what was in the back of my mind was I wanted to acknowledge or pay respect to the composers that Sondheim said always influenced him or that he had respect for, such as Ravel, Satie, Aaron Copland, Richard Rodgers. There's a small tribute to Richard Rodgers in there as well. So along the way, and then I threw in a tribute to Olivier Messiaen, was one of my favorite French composers, and a tribute to John Adams at the very end. So it's sort of, I was a little at first embarrassed that I did this. I thought, I'm culling from all these different composer styles, but it sort of worked in the trajectory of the piece because it created a sense, each verse was a different variation. Styles. And Steve said one of the musical forms he's always loved was variation. So I wanted to also tap into that idea as well and pay homage to him because he likes the idea of variation. So that's how the piece came together, basically, as it's paying tribute to composers who influenced him, and then also because it's a song that he said he always loved, and my husband loves it. So I thought, why not?
Yeah, it's like a perfect marriage. I was going to just call out too, like Sondheim is very well known for his pastiche work as well. So it kind of works on that other meta level for the song as well.
Yeah, that didn't really go through my mind, but you're right. And it's funny when you're a pianist making a version of a piece from another source, because you sort of are relying on the different styles that you know from piano playing as well. And you want it to flow, you want it to piece together in a way to hold together in its trajectory from beginning to end. And I went through different versions of it. I was taking notes. At one point, typical of me when I do this stuff, I make the pieces too difficult for myself even.
Right.
I went through and thought, okay, this is ridiculous. Take these notes out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need this. Also, having other people listen to it, getting feedback was helpful. What's not needed here or what works. Again, Mark Bennett was helpful with that because I got feedback from him on it.
I'm not going to remember which song it was because I was bouncing around here just before we were recording here. I want to say it was another national anthem one, but anyways, it was like almost like tapping on the piano and stuff like that too, which is like, oh, what a cool way again to incorporate the entire instrument of the piano and the thought of these pieces.
Yeah, that's Ted Hearn's setting of another national anthem, and he was very keen on doing that song. And that's one of the most difficult in the collection. Ted is known for writing difficult music, piano music, and he wanted a disturbing effect because of the disturbing ideas in the show. So what he did is he placed a book on the bass string, a book on the strings inside the piano, and that's where you get that kind of scratchy sound.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And the thing is, we had to experiment with the weight of different kinds of books to get just the right sound that he was after.
Do you remember what the book was that you set on?
We settled on, again, I have it on the piano over here. My husband came back with this book that was like, it was a square book. It was a children's book, and it was about maybe 3 inches.
Right.
And it had just the right amount of weight. Because if the book is too heavy, it muted the strings. So and the book was too light, you got too much pitch out of the strings. And he didn't want just pitch. He wanted a scratchy pitch because he wanted it to be disturbing to the listener. So it's always there throughout the piece.
No, it works out so well. I mean, we could probably spend another hour or so talking about this, but for people who are listening, maybe you can let them know where they can go and pick up a copy for themselves to listen to.
It's being released. It was going to be released on March 21st, 2025. The day before would have been Sondheim's 95th birthday. It's coming out, though, a week earlier on March 14th. They can purchase it online. It's on AVIE Records, AVIE, which is a London-based label, but they have an office also here in New York. And it can be downloaded from any of, Amazon, Spotify, any that they get those. It will also be available. They can purchase it online, the actual hard copy, which looks really beautiful. It has a cover. It has a very colorful, we wanted to still pay some acknowledgement or respect to the original ECM recording that the first collection was on. And ECM is always known for their covers. So we wanted to pay some homage to that, but also make it something fresh and new as well, because it was the later collection. But yes, it will be available directly from AVIE Records or online, like I said, Amazon, anywhere that people go to purchase records, purchase either hard copies or download.
I guess I should ask, as we're wrapping up here too, are there any upcoming, like concerts or presentations of this here at all, or is it just the record right now?
We were going to, because the release date was announced late last fall, it was hard to book a release concert in New York. We are doing one in late September, which will be right during the time before the Grammy consideration. So it's going to be sort of a release concert, Grammy campaign kind of concert. I can't reveal, the venue is set. I can't reveal it yet because they don't want us to reveal it till the summer.
No, fair enough. People can keep an eye out.
Yeah, it'll be in late September, and we'll put announcements out for it. And I have concerts in Europe. I have one at a festival in Portugal, of all places. They want the project, and we're working on it in Berlin. Mark Schubring was working on a venue to have it presented because I've never done it in Germany. The project. So, and there'll be other concerts in around the United States as well.
Right. Exciting. Perfect. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Well, thank you, Kyle. This was a real pleasure.